Hi, everyone. This is Sam Collins, your coding and billing expert for chiropractic, the H.J. Ross Company, and of course, ChiroSecure. Welcome to the new year. Glad you're spending some time with me, and I wish you the best and say, hey, we've all done pretty well considering what's gone on in the last few years. Let's continue that, and let's make sure we understand what's going on new and what's changing. One thing I'm always going to be careful of with you is to make sure you have the right information. I always will go with, I want the correct information, not necessarily affirmation. And often you'll find people who are adamant about a debate often are more interested in being right than getting it right. And I want you to think of all the past hyperbole we've all dealt with when things change and everyone gets excited. What am I supposed to do? And if I don't do it, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble. Well, I want to help resolve a lot of that for you because what's new for 2022, and I'm sure you've heard of it, is the No Surprises Act or the No Surprise Billing Act and what it means to us. And in simplest terms, it simply means making sure that consumers, whether it's us as consumers or our patients, aren't fooled or aren't given a bill that they were not expecting. So let's go to the slides and take a look at what's going on with this new bill, how it's going to change for us. And let's talk about the No Surprises Act. It's actually been around for a while. It's just being implemented this January. And at the end of the day, the simple answer is it's protecting patients from unexpected, undisclosed medical bills. And I would think most of us have seen or heard a lot of this type of thing. And of course, I always go back to the word hyperbole. People often exaggerate. Keep in mind, remember when HIPAA started? How everyone lost their mind. You've got to do this, you got to do that. Now, HIPAA is very important, but it's about privacy. Does it require you spend tens of thousands of dollars to comply? No. So I'll always go with something called Occam's razor. And it's meant to kind of go with, well, what's the simple solution? Shave away the exaggerations. So let's do that with this No Surprises Act. This started, of course, January 1st of this year, and it's to make patients or consumers not getting unexpected medical bills. Think of it. How many times have you heard someone went to a hospital? They go to the hospital, they choose it because it's an in-network hospital. The doctor's there, great, they get this care. Then they have a surgery, and all of a sudden they get a bill from the anesthesiologist who happened to be out of network. And of course, the patient goes, wait a minute, I wouldn't have chosen this hospital if it weren't in network. How are you giving me this unexpected bill? And what this is doing is protecting us from that. Now, how does that work for us as a small practice provider? Well, it does have some factors for us to consider, but let's consider it more from who is it affecting the most? And that's going to be our patient. So it says here, people with health insurance or with health insurance or without health insurance. In other words, your cash patients. Well, I want to stop for a second and say to that, don't you already do that? Do your cash patients ever get a surprise bill? I would think not. That's something we would disclose right up front. So I don't think that that's much of a change for us, though some people make you feel differently. Or it's also people with health insurance who receive an item service that's not covered. So by example, let's take like American Specialty Health. If you have an American Specialty Health patient, generally it doesn't cover massage or manual therapy. So what do you have to do to collect it from the patient since it's a non-covered service? You have to disclose before the service that it's non-covered and the patient understands it. Kind of like a Medicare ABN, if you're familiar, Advanced Beneficiary Notice. It's a way of notifying the patient of something that's not covered so they're aware of the cost. But it's also people who have insurance but plan to not use it for a portion of the care items. Remember, does a patient always have to use their insurance? No, they don't. But then, of course, it's simply disclosing to them what the costs are. So I want you to think in this way. Aren't you probably already doing that? Think of it in a chiropractic office. What are you already doing with every patient? Well, I'm hoping you have a financial agreement that does this. Here's a start of one. Many insurance policies do cover chiropractic care, but this office makes no representation that yours does. Insurance policies may vary greatly in terms of deductible and percentage of coverage for chiropractic care. In other words, we're not guaranteeing anything. Whenever you've been to a medical office, do you notice they say we accept insurance? We don't accept it as payment in full. And so because of this, your financial agreement likely has some language like this. Because of the variance from one insurance policy to another, we require that you, the patient, be personally responsible for the payment of your deductibles as well as any unpaid balances in this office. Of course, we'll do our best to bill your insurance, but in other words, what are we doing here? Disclosing, making sure patients are aware of their costs. That's really all this law is doing. So who has to do this? Well, the provider. We have a duty. And we have to remember when you're in network or out of network, that does make a difference. If I'm an in-network provider, frankly, I don't find this to be very complicated at all. If you have an American Specialty Health patient, it's pretty straightforward. There's a copay. It's $10, or you're with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Anytime you're in network, it's pretty easy because there's going to be fixed copays and there's contractual write-offs. I've seen this before, and you have. You bill out $150 for an exam. The insurance company says it allows $47.50, and they pay 80% of that. Therefore, the patient's going to be responsible for a little over $9 or 20% of that. So that's a pretty easy way of giving information to the patient, and they're likely aware. And let's face it, a lot of times that's why people choose you as a provider, because of course they know exactly what their costs are going to be. For an out-of-network provider, though, it becomes a little bit harder because now we have something we call co-insurance. Copays are easy. It's fixed. But when you're out of network, there's nothing that's called a copay. It's co-insurance because it's going to be the amount that wasn't paid by the insurance. It's the balance. So there's no contractual write-off. So let's take that same example. I bill $150 for an exam. When I'm in network, the allowed rate is $47.50 with a 20% amount from the patient. But what if you're out of network? You bill $150. The patient then still has insurance, and let's say it covers the same. It covers $47.50. The difference here is the patient owes the difference. You don't write it off, that other amount. You have to collect it. So in other words, when you're out of network, if you're willing to bill something, we have to be willing to collect it because there are no contractual write-offs. In other words, there's a balance. So what's important that we do is make patients aware that my fee is $150. Your insurance is going to cover some of it. We can't guarantee that amount. And you might even assume, hey, maybe it's going to pay $50 of it, but the patient is going to owe the balance. Now, let's keep in mind, I'm talking about a balance. You're all familiar with what's called the anti-kickback statute or false claims. Remember, you cannot routinely write off balances. It's part of the reason when you're in network you can because there's a contract, but when out of network you cannot. So you got to make sure patients understand that difference in price. And here will be my statement. It's just this last bullet. If you are willing to send that bill out, that means you are willing to collect it. So here's one of the things to be careful of. Don't set your fees off of your best paying insurance as much as we'd like to. Let's say you might have a few insurance companies that pay $300 for a whole visit. Fantastic. But what in turn if you have a patient's insurance that only pays $50 and you're out of network? That patient now owes you $250. So it's something to consider to kind of be somewhere in the middle. So the duty of the provider or the healthcare facility is to provide what they call a good faith estimate. In other words, an estimate of charges. It doesn't necessarily have to be exact, but a good estimate. And it is a $400 threshold. Now, on a single visit, that's easy because no single visit's probably over $400, albeit maybe one with an exam and a lot of x-rays. So I don't think we run into a problem there. But the whole point is to make sure patients are aware per visit, this is likely what your out-of-pocket's going to be. And think of it from a consumer standpoint from ours. When we go to the doctor, we hope the same thing. And what I would do is do not overcomplicate it. And I put here, provide a clear estimate of charges and what's likely to be out of pocket. I think we're doing this. I hope we are. Let your patients know, here's the services we're providing. Here's the amount of charges. Here's the expectation of your insurance. We're not guaranteeing, but expectation. This would likely be your balance. So when you're out of network, we have a greater duty to inform. In network's kind of easy because it's a set fee, but out of network. So you might think, is this the way of insurance companies getting me to join? No, it's a way of being upfront to let patients know what you're charging. One of the things, and I'll tell you, my dad's practice, he did a lot of personal injury, and he made sure patients knew because they were very injured and getting that very intense care, that visit was expensive, often over $200. We got to make sure they're aware of it. Now, there's a value to the $200, so make sure the patients see it and understand the price. Well, who else has a responsibility of this? Obviously we do, but what about the payers? What about the insurance companies? And this is the area that I'm most excited about because this is really more on the insurance companies, in my opinion, because let's face it, how do we know what they allow? Have you ever tried this? You call in insurance and you say, do you cover chiropractic? Oh, yes, we do. Then how much do you allow for 98940 or any other code? Oh, we can't tell you that. So then, in other words, how can we really disclose without doing that? So that's why we have a duty to tell the patient what our full fee is. But here's what's changing a little bit. This duty of the insurance company is a few things. Number one, and this is going to be important, they have to verify every provider who's in network whether they wish to be in or out of network every 90 days. So fully expect, if you're a network or something, you're probably going to get some type of notice every 90 days to reaffirm you want to be in network. Because one of the problems, and I'm sure you've run into this, you drop out of a network and you did so a year ago. But for some strange reason, or reasons that the insurance company is lazy, your name still appears. So the patient comes into your office assuming, oh, you're in network, and then you bill and you're out of network. Well, the insurance company now has a duty for that. So here's going to be the kind of the cool news with this. If an insurance company has listed you as in network and you are not, you now can dispute that. And of course, the insurance company will have a duty to pay it. Now, that's going to be interesting to see that implemented, but that's really going to be the issue. So a 90-day to make sure that you're in or out of network. We're going to affirm that much more. And once it's been affirmed, they have to update that directory within 2 business days. And providers who don't verify, they have to pull off. So these lists should get a lot better. I've run into offices over and over with our network where I help them, where they've dropped out of plans 6-7 months ago, but their name still appears on the list. How lazy is that by an insurance company? So I think this is putting more emphasis to that, because how do you choose care when you can't know what your insurance, what members are or not in network, or what it means to be out of network? So part of the law also emphasizes something else, and this to me is maybe the bigger of it. Insurance companies have to be more transparent about what they are allowing for services. And so you should see more and more online portals like Availity and others that make it accessible for you to know what plans allow. Now, I'm going to give you a simple solution to that. You've all billed insurance before, and let's face it, as much as we think we bill a lot of insurances, we don't bill as many as we think. Most often you're billing probably 5 to 6, 7 insurance companies. What I'd like you to do, start to create a spreadsheet, list those companies, and then just list your common codes. I don't need you to list every code, just the codes you bill regularly. And let's face it again, how many services do you do on a regular basis? 7 or 8, manipulation, therapies, exams. And what I'd like you to do is go through and gather that data from that plan. What does it allow and pay? So that way you can inform the patient better of what their balance is. Now, that's just a good business practice, because I want a patient to be able to choose care based on their knowledge of what the costs are going to be if they're using insurance. If they're not using insurance, no big deal. I let them know right up front. That's pretty straightforward. So here's what's happening. And take a look here. This is the Availity portal through Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. And there's a new tool. You go to Availity, and when you're in network, you should be able to plug in a code and it will tell you the fee. And that way you can make a good estimate. One, are you way overcharging? And or are you undercharging? But most importantly, you know the fee. That way your patient has full disclosure of what they're going to pay out of pocket. Let's remember the back end of this is to make sure the patients are aware of their costs. The other part of this that's kind of cool, let's say you're out of network and this insurance company pays some ridiculous allowance where they say, oh, that's the usual and customary, which they always like to hide behind. Well, now there's going to be an independent dispute resolution where they won't be able to hide and say, well, we pay $50 for something that clearly has a usual allowance of, say, $100. And so the first thing we're going to be able to do is dispute with the insurance. And if they don't relent and or it's not fair, there's an independent government agency that will now handle this, and it's independent. Now, I will highlight it's going to cost a little money. But when I say a little, $25 from us, $25 from the insurance. And I would make the patients initiate this, because isn't it interesting that if you give someone a discount, quote unquote, they'll say, oh, no, you can't do that. But an insurance company can. So we're going to be able to start to push back on that. My part of this that I think is the thing that's going to be most striking, we should have a lot more transparency of what these insurances allow. I would say in the short term, though, gather data from in your office. What I do with my network offices, I help them gather that data, get into your files and say, okay, who are the big 5 insurances you're billing? Let's list your 8 most popular codes. What does that plan pay? Then what does the other plan pay? So I know what each pays. I know what the patient will owe. But you know what I do with that data as well? You're going to look and go, ooh, that plan pays a lot better than another. And if I have a plan that pays better than another, wouldn't it be smart to market to those patients? Why not? Wouldn't I want a patient that has a better plan? Of course. So I want to have a little bit of movement there so I know what's going on. So the summary of this is going to be, keep it simple. Establish a fair and reasonable fee schedule. Know that your patients may have to pay the full thing, that's the estimate, or their insurance may pay some. Clarify if you are in or out of network with any particular carrier, and inform your patients. When a patient comes in and they're thinking you're part of Blue Cross Blue Shield and you're not, be really clear with them and say, hey, I want to make sure you're aware I'm not in your network. And they're going to say, but you were on the list. Now we've got a dispute resolution that chances are that insurance is going to have to pay better because they did not disclose it properly. And that's what I want. I just want a fair and equitable. I'm not saying we're always right and we're doing the right things, quote unquote. We're attempting to. But I do know the same on the insurance. I want somebody that can oversee that as well. Make sure you disclose your fees to your patients at the time of care. What's the cost? Let there be no surprises. Don't have someone going, oh my God, I didn't know this cost $300. They should well know it was $300 because the value was there. Be clear on their out-of-pocket costs. So when you're doing your financial agreement, tell them what the cost is going to be. If you're in network, of course, kind of easy. But if out of network, let them know the full charges. What this comes down to is simple disclosures so that your patients are not having any problems. Now, realistically, from a chiropractic standpoint, I don't think this is going to be as critical because I believe we've done this already. Chiropractors are very good about making patients understand fees. And that's why often we do have some type of cash discounts. Maybe we're using a discount medical program. Maybe for that matter, you're doing some type of prepay plan. But in either case, you're always doing things to disclose. And that's all we want. Make sure that the patient understands their fees. And I would say, avoid the hyperbole and look at the simple solution. So here would be an example. This is a form that we have. We do this for our network members and people who have digital coding, but it's a simple financial agreement. I want to highlight two areas that I put arrows to. It says, our services may not be covered by insurance. Our office and providers are not in network with any insurance plan. So when you don't belong to something, make that clear. We don't belong to anything. Therefore, everything you get towards your payment from the insurance, great, but you may owe up to the balance. And so, of course, we're going to provide you with a good faith estimate. And maybe you put a list together like this. Here's my exam fee, the adjustment fee, and here's the total fee. Here's the expectation of what the insurance is going to pay. That way, there's a disclosure. I would bet maybe not quite this detailed. You're likely already doing that when it comes to your financial agreements. I'm just saying make it a little bit tighter or more clear. Well, what about if you are in network with a plan? It is pretty straightforward, but I want to highlight two areas. Here it says, as a member provider of your plan, we will directly bill your insurance and you will be responsible for the co-payments at the time of service as well as any deductible. In other words, straightforward of what it's going to be because you're in network. And of course, give them a financial responsibility of the copay or if it's an excluded service. Think of it. What is this program or what is this law doing? It's making clear that patients know their fees. Chiropractors are good at that. Do you know that chiropractors are the one profession that don't have problems with copays? The American Physical Therapy Association did a study last year where they found that once a patient had a $30 or more copay, they would lose about 1/3 of their patients. Do you know that wasn't evident for chiropractic? And you know why I think it is? Because chiropractors have never fully relied on insurance. It's an aid, but because of that, we place the value on the service, and so does the patient, and that they'll pay for it. So now these two forms, again, are pretty straightforward and simple. If you have our digital coding through HJ Ross, they are in the document library. Actually, will be in there later this week. If you attend a seminar with me, they're included there. Or if you're a network member, of course, also. So I'm going to encourage you to start to get the right information. Don't get in the hyperbole, and probably start to look at who's going to help you do this. We offer a service we call the Network with HJ Ross. Just go right to our website where it's a hotline. You can call me, email me, fax me on a daily basis if you like. Some every few months, but we also offer two levels. One is the lower cost where it's just a question and answer, but more of the platinum or our premium where I become part of the office in this way. We have a monthly meeting and seminar together, a group seminar, and it provides 2 continuing education seminars per year. Always know that ChiroSecure and the HJ Ross Company are your partners. We're here to make sure that your practice thrives. So if you have questions or need any resources on news or updates, go to our website, HJ Ross Company. Our phone number is here. And I'm going to say to all of you, slow down, relax, take a breath, get the right information, and move forward to help your patients because that's what you're looking to do. So I'm going to wish you again a very happy new year and say next week the guest host will be Sherry McAllister. Take care, everyone. I'll see you next time.